Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. This is my first ever video on this channel on the urinary system. Talking to you today about the kidney structure, what these things do. So I'm just going to draw the main sort of divisions of the kidney. So this, you probably already know what a kidney looks like, but I'm just going to draw it for you guys anyway. Okay, so that's that. And then I'm just going to draw these things. These are the medullary pyramids. I'll just show you what that is in a minute. So these are the medullary pyramids here. And we have the outer cortex and inner medulla, if you didn't know that already. And we have here, which is the sort of renal artery. You want to say, or renal vein. You want to say whatever you want to say. But the renal artery is usually above the renal vein. Okay, and this part here. Okay, so let's draw that like that. Okay, so you can see what's happening. And this is the ureter. Okay, so now I'm going to label it now. Okay, so this is obviously Okay, guys, so the outer layer of the kidney is known as a fibrous capsule. Some people just call it a capsule. I want to be a bit more specific, and I'm going to call it a fibrous capsule. And the fibrous capsule is actually a pretty important structure in the kidney, because what it actually does is it is important in obviously protecting the kidney from impact and trauma and any damage. So it protects the kidney from damaged. Okay, and this is sometimes called a fibrous capsule, also known sometimes as an adipose capsule, because it's actually made up of a layer of fat. And adipose tissue, we know, is fatty tissue, and fatty tissue obviously protects the kidney from that in that case. So that's the capsule. That's very important. And then we have something called the outer cortex. So this is the outer cortex, and the outer cortex of the kidney is pretty important. We have an outer cortex and an inner medulla. So we kind of say this whole sort of section here is sort of the medulla. Okay, the inner medulla, okay, more specifically. Okay, the inner medulla is this part there, the outer sort of part of the kidney. Very, very important for you to understand. The outer cortex of the kidney is actually very important again, and it actually will actually divide into the kidney to form other things. And the outer cortex contains something called the renal corpuscle, and that contains the glomerular capillaries, okay, so, or the glomerulus. Okay, keep it very, very, very simple for you guys at the moment. I'll go a bit more in depth a bit later on in my lecture series, so just stay tuned for that. Okay, so that's that. And then we have this part here, which is called these sort of lines here, and these are called the medullary pyramids. Okay, so I'm just going to label this down here for you. So these are the medullary, pyramids. And the medullary pyramids are actually, pretty important as well. Every single structure in the kidney has a defined region. And these pyramids contain mainly tubules that transport urine from the cortical region, and that will then go to the calyces, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. So this medullary pyramids mainly contains something we call the renal tubule. Okay, and that contains things like the loop of Henle, things like the distal convoluted tubule, and collecting tubule and collecting duct. Things we'll talk about again later on in my lecture series. And then we get two different things, actually. We get something here called the renal artery. Okay, and the renal artery actually comes from the heart. So I'm going to draw the heart, for example. Very bad drawing, or very non-professional drawing of the heart. Let me just actually... So the actual renal artery derives from the aorta of the heart. So if I just draw, one of the aortic arcs of the heart, let's say we're talking about this one. This aortic arc actually connects all the way up to the renal artery. And that's pretty interesting, because this is what allows, oxygen to go into the heart. So oxygenated blood will go into the kidneys by the renal artery from the aortic arc of the heart. So this is the heart, we're talking about, and this is the aortic arc, aortic arc. And that obviously receives all of this oxygenated blood from the lungs, okay, from the lungs, obviously from the left side of the heart. Okay, very, very important. Okay, so oxygenated blood goes into the heart, to the kidney, because the kidney, of course, requires oxygen. There's a lot of mitochondria in the kidney, which is very important for active transport. We'll talk about that again later on in my lecture. And oxygen is very, very important for that. Okay, energy is needed, oxygen is needed, etc., etc. Okay, so we need oxygen for that, for the kidney. What's also very, very important is something coming out, and this is the renal vein. And the renal vein is also very important and very intimate to the heart. So I'm just going to show that here. So this is the renal vein, and the renal vein is also important because it actually allows blood to go back into the heart. And how does that happen? It goes through the heart by the inferior vena cava. And the inferior vena cava is where all the deoxygenated blood goes into. Okay, because it collects all of the, so let's just say this is the inferior vena cava, although it isn't in my drawing. I should have kind of drawn a diagram of the heart here, but whatever. Hopefully you should understand that. If you don't, just drop a comment down below and I'll try and explain it to you. But that's the inferior vena cava, and that's where the deoxygenated blood kind of goes into, and that obviously will go to the lungs to collect that oxygen and then travel back into the heart and then go to the kidneys through the renal artery once again. So that's pretty important. Very, very important structures in the kidney, as you can see. We have something, now I want to actually zoom in into this structure here. So, and this structure is important because we have something here. Okay, so this top here, part here, this is called the minor. Okay, so this is the minor calyx, okay? And this here is the major, okay, major calyx. And this is pretty important actually, because when the urine actually becomes produced in the kidney, what's going to happen is that it will pass through a renal papilla. So where the renal papilla is, let me just show you that now. So right at the tip sort of thing, so I'm just going to draw it in green, just for you to show you, right at the tip here, this is the renal, okay, renal papilla. So what happens is that, I'll talk to you again about this in my lecture series a bit more after. I'll keep telling you this like a million times. But what happens is that urine goes down the loop of Henle, it goes to the collecting tubule, collecting ducts, and then it goes to another series of ducts called the ducts of Bellany. The ducts of Bellany will then drain the urine in the renal papilla. The renal papilla will then go into the minor calyces, and the minor calyces will then sort of converge. About two or three minor calyces will converge to form a major calyx, I'll show you here, and that will then go into the renal pelvis. And this whole thing here is the renal pelvis. Let me just show you here. This thing here is the renal pelvis, where the urine will also travel to, and that urine will then go, so I'm going to show you my urine in yellow. So the urine goes like that, down the renal pelvis, down this part here. This part here is the, let me just draw that here for you. It's the renal, sorry, not the renal, it's the ureter. Okay, so the ureter will then go down, and then if you imagine, I'm just going to draw a big old structure here. Let's say this is the bladder. Okay, of course, the bladder is a bit more complicated in life, but that's the bladder. And then the bladder will then discharge the urine through the urethra. Okay, so urethra down there. Okay, so very, very important for you to understand how that works. Okay, so that's what I wanted to talk to you about. It actually is, that's basically what the kidney is. Okay, so that's what the kidney does. That the kidney is important into making sure that this urine is actually maintained properly and discharging all things like toxins, things like filtering certain things and in the glomerulus, reabsorbing certain things and secreting certain things. And the kidney is also important as well because it has a homeostatic role, it has an excretory role, it has a hormonal role by secreting renin and erythropoietin, and also activating vitamin D, because vitamin D becomes activated only when it reaches the kidneys. And some people who have a problem with their kidneys, vitamin D does not become activated properly, so therefore they have to take other supplements and stuff like that. So it's very important for you to understand how the kidney works. Before I actually end this video, I want to talk to you a bit more about something else in the kidney, something which you probably did not remember about. If you do remember, then congratulations. But if you don't, then I'm just going to show you anyway. So on top of the kidney sits, if you know, sits the very, very important, very famous, actually, very, very famous adrenal gland. So the adrenal gland actually sits above of the kidney, and the adrenal gland is very, very important. Okay, so this is the adrenal gland. I'm just going to draw that right here. I have no space on this page, but this is the adrenal gland, and the adrenal gland is actually divided. Again, when I think about the adrenal gland, the way that I remember this is that it's kind of a mini kidney, because it also has an outer cortex, and it also has a inner medulla. So it's kind of a kidney in itself, a kind of a mini form of a kidney. And the cortex is divided into things like the zona glomerulata, the zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis, where also secrete hormones like mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, androgens, things like that, to actually control other functions in the body. And the adrenal medulla, if you didn't know already, secretes adrenaline. Adrenaline is very, very important for the fight and flight response of the sympathetic nervous system, okay, part of the autonomic nervous system in the brain.